Jews were running everywhere in the city, and we lived in an apartment, and in the night the Germans arrived and surrounded the block of buildings and started apartment after apartment to investigate. And my father had constructed, I would say not a second wall, but a wall in wood in a closet, and he put my mother, my sister, and I behind, and put clothes just for the Germans when they opened the closet, not to see that there was no wall, but just wood. And so we listened all what happened. That means beating the children in the neighbor apartment, and all these Jews who were crying and in despair. And the Germans arrived, they ringed, and immediately they asked my father, "Where is your wife and your children?" And he said that they are in the country, and they started to investigate, and they opened the door of the closet, and they pushed all the clothes, and I have in my ears still the noise of the clothes, but they did not touch the false wall, and so after a few hours we could escape, and we succeeded to escape, but my father did not come back.
Serge, Klarsfeld's father, was one of 200,000 French citizens who were deported, never to return. Each life lost is represented by a light bulb in this memorial on the Ile de la Cité in Paris. Half of those lost were Jews. The Holocaust, or Shoah, as the French refer to it, was an unimaginable catastrophe the Jews were to suffer at the hands of the Germans. Yet the hatred on which it was based was not unique to the German Third Reich. For decades, anti-Semitism had been virulent in Europe, from Britain to Russia. Why? Today, France has the largest population of Jews in Western Europe, some 700,000. It is a community still subject to anti-Semitic attacks. In 1989, the desecration of a Jewish cemetery in Carpentras brought France's President Mitterrand out of the Élysée Palace to lead a demonstration through the streets of Paris. Goldenberg's restaurant in the Rue des Rosiers is a well-known landmark for the traditional Ashkenazi Jewish community in Paris. Its proprietor, Jo Goldenberg, has a high profile in the political circles of Paris. He describes what happened in this restaurant in 1982.
Bien, comme un commando, 4 terroristes qui ont débarqué au bout de la rue des Rosiers et tranquillement sont arrivés comme des promeneurs avec les mitraillettes cachées dans le veston jusqu'à l'établissement, et que lorsqu'ils sont arrivés devant l'établissement, un des leurs a fait rouler une grenade qui a ricoché dans la caisse, c'est-à-dire à l'endroit de la caisse, pour venir exploser dans la vitrine, dans la salle du restaurant. Et je peux dire par chance, elle a implosé au lieu d'exploser. C'est un cas exceptionnel. C'est ce qui a limité également et les pertes de vies humaines et la dégradation de l'établissement. Et ensuite, ils ont pénétré, un derrière l'autre, mitraillette au poing, et ils ont mitraillé ici tout le monde, tout le public qui s'y trouvait, assis, debout, peu importe. Et ils s'en prenaient à n'importe qui, bien sûr, n'importe comment. Il y a eu 80 impacts de balles qui ont été retrouvés ici, 7 tués et 22 blessés graves.
After a similar attack in the Rue Copernic, Raymond Barre, the then Prime Minister, was quoted as saying, "They intended to kill Jews, but ended up killing innocent Frenchmen instead." Jean Kahn is the president of CRIF, an organisation which represents Jewish interests in French politics. What did he make of such a remark?
Vous savez, il y a des lapsus qui peuvent être commis par quiconque, il en est certains qui sont révélateurs. Et comme il y a quelques jours, le même homme politique, M. Raymond Barre, a fait allusion à un lobby israélo-américain, et que cela se passait par hasard 10 ans, jour pour jour, après l'attentat de la rue Copernic, je me suis dit que le lapsus initial était sans doute révélateur.
Is anti-Semitism endemic in French society? How can it have survived the Holocaust? It would seem, like cancer, to have many forms and possibly as many causes. The wartime experience has coloured the lives of many surviving French Jews. German occupation of France left the south of the country largely under the control of the puppet regime in Vichy. Serge Klarsfeld is a lawyer who spent a good part of his life pursuing war criminals. He was instrumental in bringing Klaus Barbie, the butcher of Lyon, to trial. He's written many books on the Vichy regime. What was his assessment of its treatment of the Jews?
It was a very anti-Semitic regime, and in October 1940, without any pressure of the Germans, they took anti-Jewish laws which were very, very anti-Semitic. First, the Statute of Jews on the 3rd of October 1940. The result was that Jews became citizens of second or third rank without having the right to have any official duty and to no possibility to be lawyers, doctors, and so on, except just a few of them. And on the 4th of October 1940, they took a law giving to the préfet in each department the right to arrest and to put in special camps Jews of foreign nationality. So they initiated a movement against the Jews, and of course, for the Germans, it was easier to deal with the final solution when they decided to apply the final solution in the west of Europe.
Michel Zlotowski reports on Jewish affairs in France. What was his assessment?
The French would say they're not guilty, definitely. I think, to a great extent, they're wrong. The Vichy regime is definitely guilty. The Vichy regime on many occasions went much further than what was requested of it by the Nazi occupier. The Jewish racial laws passed by the French government even at the very beginning of the occupation went much further than what was requested by the Nazis. There is a French anti-Semitism, there has always been.
Opposition to Vichy anti-Semitism was strong among the French Protestant minority. Blatant anti-Semitic legislation of Prime Minister Laval and his government also troubled the conscience of the dominant Catholic Church.
I would say that, of course, the Protestants are closer to the Jews due to the ancient Testament, and also because they were themselves victims of persecutions in the 16th, 17th century. But I must say that their intervention, the pressure they exerted on the Vichy government was, of course, less important than the pressure of the high officials of the Catholic Church. The Germans have prepared a program of daily train to Auschwitz of 1,000 people a day, and that program was stopped because Laval told to the Germans on the 2nd of September, you cannot ask Jews like in self-service, we cannot deliver them, and we meet a protest of the church which is very strong, and the head of the protest is Monseigneur Gerlier, the Primat de Gaulle, Archbishop of Lyon, and I saw so many Jews were saved due to that protest, which was a public protest. The letters of the address of the archbishops were read in many churches, and starting that moment, French population started to help Jews.
That the Catholic Church has a nagging conscience about its relations with the Jews is not surprising. Crusading Christians slaughtered thousands of Jews in their rampage through Europe in the Middle Ages. The Spanish Inquisition extinguished a flourishing Jewish culture in what had been Muslim Spain. Elements of anti-Semitic dogma permeated the teaching of the Church until very recent times, in particular the charge of deicide.
L'antisémitisme provient, pour ce qui concerne les chrétiens, des décisions qui avaient été prises par un certain nombre de personnes qui ont écrit les évangiles, de dire que le peuple juif était un peuple déicide.
In 1959, Pope John XXIII called Vatican Council II. It rescinded the charge of deicide against the Jews. Catholic teaching relies heavily on the New Testament, and in the Gospels are many references Jews consider unfavourable. Within French education today, there is an awareness that these can foster anti-Jewish attitudes from an early age. Madame Kessler tries to address these in her teaching of Judaism to Christians.
Sans aucun doute, le dogme, enfin qui n'était pas un dogme, enfin le déicide a longtemps contribué à cet enseignement du mépris, selon l'expression de Jules Isaac. Je crois qu'il n'y a pas que cela. Il y a également, par exemple, et c'est puisque le déicide maintenant et depuis Vatican II ne devrait plus s'enseigner, mais il a des effets que l'on pourrait dire à retardement dans la conscience chrétienne. Mais ce qui demeure, c'est un certain nombre de mauvaises interprétations des textes chrétiens eux-mêmes. Je ne donnerai qu'un exemple. Que signifie l'expression « les Juifs » dans l'évangile de Jean, l'enseignement qui est donné à propos des pharisiens, notamment dans l'évangile de Matthieu, demande que les chrétiens aient une connaissance renouvelée de tous ces termes. Et donc les racines de leur, peut-être pas de l'antisémitisme, mais de l'anti-judaïsme sont là, et c'est pourquoi ceux d'entre les chrétiens qui font cet effort de vouloir éradiquer l'anti-judaïsme et l'antisémitisme de l'enseignement chrétien savent que c'est sur ces points essentiellement, et peut-être avant toute chose, qu'il faut revenir.
The war and its aftermath had left the traditional French community of Ashkenazi Jews in a beleaguered state. There was a tendency to assimilate and suppress an open Jewish identity. Then France, and Paris in particular, were subject to a large influx of Sephardi Jews.
Dans les années 60, il y a eu une forte influence du judaïsme nord-africain en particulier, le judaïsme séfarade, qui s'est implanté en France, surtout juifs d'Algérie, Tunisie et Maroc. Et l'influence a été très sincèrement énorme, dans ce sens où la communauté vivante à Paris, et en France en particulier, communauté en général ashkénaze, venait à la limite à bout de force après tout ce qui a pu se passer dans le judaïsme européen, la Shoah, la guerre et autres. Donc ça a donné une certaine pulsion, une nouvelle pulsion au judaïsme français.
The renewed strength and vitality of the Jewish community and its more exotic character was linked to some French eyes with the simultaneous arrival also from North Africa of hundreds of thousands of Muslims, les Arabes. This was to add a new and racist twist to anti-Semitism.
I would say that the major feeling here is not anti-Semitism or racism, it's xenophobia. It's hatred for the foreigner. And the notion of foreigner is a very extensible one. I mean, if you live in a village, and if you marry a girl from next village, distant of 1.5 miles, she will be regarded for the rest of her life a foreigner in France. So when you have people coming from other countries, you understand the cultural shock, especially if they're not of the same religion, same faith, and if they don't eat the same way you eat or drink the same things you do. Then there is racism. There is racism, but the racism is mostly against North African immigrants and blacks, which were all part of the French Empire, by the way.
Aujourd'hui, ils sont anti-noirs, demain, ils sont anti-arabes, après-demain, ils sont anti-juifs. Et c'est comme ça, toutefois, que nous percevons le phénomène du Front National et de M. Le Pen, qui n'ose pas se dire tout à fait ouvertement contre les juifs, qui biaise là-dessus, qui essaye d'éviter de dire ça parce que c'est interdit par la loi en France, mais qui n'hésite pas à se dire contre les immigrés, c'est-à-dire les Noirs et les Arabes. Mais nous ne faisons aucune illusion, nous savons très bien que dans son esprit, dans tous ceux qui pensent comme lui, il n'y a pas de différence entre antisémitisme et racisme. L'antisémitisme est une forme de racisme, tout simplement.
The re-emergence in France of political parties of the extreme right, such as one led by Jean-Marie Le Pen, has given public expression to suppressed hatreds.
It has been a very bad awakening for many Jews and non-Jews alike in France, because we thought that anti-Semitism had become a taboo, a real taboo, that it had vanished from the political scene. And suddenly with people like Jean-Marie Le Pen, which are obviously not openly anymore anti-Semitic, he used to be, and he never reached the front stage. Since he toned down a little bit, he has reached front stage, but we know he is anti-Semitic. When you read what he says, when you listen carefully to what he says, anti-Semitism is there. There is now a taboo that has been crossed, that has been overruled. It's the taboo of anti-Semitism. You can now be someone looking for a seat in the parliament and even to become president of France and being openly racist, xenophobic, and anti-Semitic. And given the number of votes, the amount of votes which are going to Le Pen, I think this is a very strong danger here today.
Pierre Bloch heads a league against racism. He's recently been researching anti-Semitism in French publications like La Libre Parole, free speech in English.
Vous savez, je dirais que c'est très difficile à expliquer. Actuellement, je suis en train de revoir toute la collection de La Libre Parole, le journal antisémite de 1900, c'est-à-dire il y a 90 ans. Eh bien, le style n'a pas changé. C'est les mêmes mots qu'on lit aujourd'hui dans un certain nombre de journaux, c'est les mêmes mots qu'emploie M. Le Pen, l'internationale juive, l'internationale judéo-maçonnique. Depuis un siècle, les antisémites ont le même vocabulaire et n'ont rien changé de leur apostrophe à l'égard des juifs. Rien de nouveau sous le soleil, c'est la bêtise de l'antisémitisme. La libre parole que j'avais sous les yeux encore ce matin, que je suis en train d'étudier, publiait par exemple la liste des maires juifs. Eh bien aujourd'hui, quand vous lisez les journaux d'extrême droite, on vous donne la liste des députés juifs ou de ceux qui sont demi-juifs ou quart de juifs. Ça n'a pas changé.
The Dreyfus Affair, at the turn of the century, rocked the French establishment and polarized society. Dreyfus, a Jewish captain in the French army, was accused of spying for the Germans. Sentenced in 1894, he spent 5 years in jail on Devil's Island. In a famous open letter, the novelist Émile Zola accused the French government of anti-Semitism. He too was jailed for libel. Eventually proved innocent, Dreyfus was reinstated. The crux of the affair was the charge that as a Jew he had a loyalty stronger than that to France. There is a belief that Jews in France, as elsewhere, have a double loyalty, which in certain political circumstances could conflict.
It's strange because there is a parallel between, for this particular issue between the communists and the Jews. In the mid-50s, the communists were accused of double allegiance, being more faithful, in fact, to Moscow than to Paris. And after a while, everyone saw that this was just pure bullshit, and this was dropped. And I think it's more or less the same with the stories of double allegiance of the Jews. First allegiance to Israel and then to their home country. I think this is absolutely groundless. And people understand it now in France, that it is groundless, that the Jews are faithful citizens of the Republic, and very strongly so, and even the most religious one, which for some reasons could feel that they do not belong to the country. To the contrary, the chief rabbi of France has said very many times that there's absolutely no clash whatsoever between the values of the Republic and the values of Judaism. Thus, being a good and faithful Jew doesn't prevent you from being a good and faithful citizen of the Republic. And being a good citizen of the Republic doesn't mean you cannot have, you cannot support the state of Israel, which is a friendly state of France. There is no clash of interest.
In the shadow of Notre Dame, the Memorial de la Déportation is virtually invisible, buried underground like so many victims of the Holocaust. It may also be symbolic of the wish to bury the guilt of the past. Today, though, visitors walk back into the light of Paris, where anti-Semitism still exists.
Vous savez, les temps qui sont très troubles et troublés aujourd'hui semblent nécessiter une très grande vigilance, et en particulier celle du maintien du souvenir et de la mémoire. Et quand nous entendons certains vouloir prôner la négation de la Shoah ou la banalisation de la Shoah ou la falsification de l'histoire, je crois que notre rôle reste important. Et je ne pense pas qu'il se limite à la période actuelle. Je pense que dans toutes les décennies qui vont suivre, il faudra que nos successeurs veuillent s'armer pour lutter dans ce même combat, pour lutter contre l'oubli, parce que, vous le savez, un continent sans mémoire ne mérite pas la liberté.